Black like me. Black like me. Black like me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. Mic check. Mic check. Testing 1, 2, 3, 4. I want to tell you a story. One night I was having a beer with a good friend of mine, and I live in a community that has really struggled with Black achievement in our academic educational programs or services in our elementary schools. And we have some of the worst disparities between Blacks and whites in the nation. And so my friend asked my thought about a Black school that was going to focus on boys. And I said, well, I support it, because we've let everyone else have a shot at educating our children, and look where we are. Sure, I love the idea of a school for Black boys. I knew that we had boys' schools and girls' schools and Catholic schools and other types of specialized groups. And he said something to me that I'll never forget. He said, but Alex, if you do an all-Black school, what about all of the other Black children who can't get in? Now, let me just say that sounds very woke and conscientious. But when Harvard was created, or Radcliffe, or private schools, private girls' schools, private boys' schools, private religious schools, when they were set up, did people wonder about the Protestants who wouldn't go to a Catholic school, or all the men who wouldn't go to an all-women school, or all the women who wouldn't go to an all-male school? And I remember our community being up in arms like, but what about all of the other Black children who can't get into that school? Well, educate them like we're supposed to with the other tens of thousands of students. But let's not stop Black progress because you think that this school should accommodate all Black children. This isn't the school district. This is one school, one charter school within it. And then the second point is etched even more indelibly in my mind. And he said, okay, but Alex, if you support an all Black school, I feel like you're giving up on the white community. Yeah, your volumes are fine. I offered that pregnant pause. I feel like you're giving up on the white community. What does the education or the miseducation of Black children have to do with the white community? And why does the success of Black people mean that I'm giving up on my white friends? And why are the two connected? Aren't they mutually exclusive? And hasn't the education of Black people been in the hands of white people since Brown versus the Board of Education and striking down the segregation laws? And how is it that Black progress is hurting my white friends' feelings? My response to him was, wow, you said a lot. And let me ask you this. Do you say that in your other professional settings? Do you talk about this situation with your friends who are doctors or attorneys or accountants or executives and CEOs? Because if you don't talk to your white friends about how they have continued to allow their children to be educated and to go on to some of the best colleges in the nation, the world, and not give a rip about the fact that we have some of the worst academic and educational disparities in the nation between Black children and white children. And if you all don't talk about that at the country club or at Rotary or at your places of gathering, why do you have the right to bring it up with me? If you don't challenge your white friends to not give up on Black people, then you don't have the right to say that to your Black friend. And he said, point well taken. I've never forgotten that because I realize some of what holds back Black progress is not just the Republican Party. It's not just Trump and his cronies. It's not just Mitch McConnell. Like, we point at these individuals, they're stopping progress. Listen, we know what they think, we know what they do, and we know how to sidestep them. But what often delivers such a staggering blow to the progress of Black people are the well-intentioned white people who are wondering, well, if you move out of the inner city, what does that mean for the Black people left behind? Well, your tax dollars are going to help all of us as well. Why is it that I have to worry about the progress of all Black people and you get to think about just your own family? I remember after about my second year of marriage, my wife and I sold a home that we bought because we wanted to move to another neighborhood, have a little bit more land, be across the street from a park. Plus, at the time, I had an adult cousin living with us. She was in college, and we needed more space. And I remember mentioning it to one of my friends, and he said, "Wow, why didn't you buy a house in the Black neighborhood?" And I said, well, unlike you, I have lived around Black people my entire life, and I don't have anything to prove. But like you, I want to live in a home so that when I sell it, I can make a killing on it like you do. You get to think about economics in your house and comfort and location and school district. You want me to think about my proximity to Black people where I live? So then now you're imposing a level of geographical ghettoization. You're now telling me that I should consider only living in Black communities because you think that's good. When I was growing up and I saw Black people living in neighborhoods like the one I live in, it motivated me. When I saw Black people driving things I wanted to drive, it motivated me. When I saw Black people taking vacation, it motivated me. And so one of the things that I want my Black Like Me podcast listeners to understand is, if you're white and you are awakening as an ally, I want you to understand and check this mindset that is very subtle. It sounds like it is just being cautious and conscientious and very woke, but it's very divisive because it's the voice of a so-called friend saying, not too fast, not too much, not too long, because you don't want to leave the other Black people behind. And you're such a good one, Alex. You're such a good one that we need you around the not so good ones. But you know, my job in society is to not only model something new for Black people, but to model something new and different for white people. And I don't need white people telling me how to be Black in a Black community or bicultural community. I need white people to not police my Blackness, my life, where I live, and how Black kids are educated. I want people to understand their role in not providing a roadblock as we move ahead. Season 7 is going to be exciting, and the theme is rising to the occasion. Rising to the occasion. That means doing what must be done with whatever resources one has in the moment that one has. It's not waiting for the perfect moment. It's seizing the opportune moment now. And I'll be talking with people who are doing that, who are pursuing excellence in spite of less than desirable conditions, because they believe that this moment is right. And I think that that's very, very important. And so I'll be talking to professors, and I'll be talking with entrepreneurs, and I'll be talking with folks who serve the community, civil servants, who are just talking about their life, their take, and what they have done to rise to the occasion, and how the rising to the occasion of others has inspired them. Rising to the occasion is our response to the not so new reality of racial tension in America. So many folks and my friends want to wait for a perfect moment for things to align. There's a perfect administration and there's a perfect president and there's a perfect CEO. But those folks work within systems of not only their own minds and their own experiences and their own communities, but the political or corporate systems in which they work and live and operate. And so what are Black people to do in this not so new reality of racial tension in America? And again, I stress not so new, because so many of us are seeing things in the news, in the media that we've never seen before. And so we're trying to figure out, is this new? And it's not. It's just emboldened. And it's not so cautious about who sees it. And it's not covered in a sheet. It can just sit there with the mic and say what it needs to say. And so Black people are stepping out unapologetically, and we're not shocked with the racial tensions that are so high. What's really shocking to us is that others are noticing so intensely around the world. That's what's shocking to Black people. Hardly a day goes by that the subject of race doesn't rear its head in the news or in business or in education or even in pulpits. And so what I love about season 7 is that we're going to talk about race, but what we do in the face of racial tensions. Now, I was thinking about the old Negro spiritual. What did we mean when we sang, "We shall overcome"? Does it mean that we'll wait it out until our changes come and then overcome with patience? Or does it mean we'll overcome because of self-agency and self-determination and our own self-confidence? For many, they are confident that the white masses are going to experience this collective aha epiphany, this wake-up call, and embrace their brown and Black colleagues and neighbors in new fashion. But even as our white colleagues, our white allies wake up, don't you think that their grogginess from being asleep and sleepwalking for so long might mean that being woke to some is their destination? Hey, I'm woke. Hey, I'm woke. She's woke. He's woke. Oh, they're woke. That's not helpful at all. They must figure out what woke means. They must figure out what woke costs. And if they want to, and find out if they really want to pay the steep price of wokeness. And will they be ready when they discover that their woke conscience is way too much for some and not enough for others? And this is all predicated upon their waking up in the first place. But what if they don't anytime soon? We must still rise to the occasion. When African Americans were not allowed to attend white colleges, we created our own. In fact, law stipulated that if you're in a state, in some states, and if you're in a state where Black people are not able to go to your schools, then you must give land for the development of these Black colleges. They're called HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities. Do you know that Cheney University of Pennsylvania, a Black college, an HBCU, was founded in 1837? That's 30 years before the Civil War. Or how about Lincoln University, also in Pennsylvania, in 1854? Wilberforce in Ohio, 1856. Harris Stowe in 1857. Sure, some of these colleges were built with white money, with white abolitionists and people who wanted to see the education of Black people, but they were staffed and professored, if you will, by Black faculty. And when we didn't have access to the mainstream education, we created those avenues. We rose to the occasion. Now listen to this. 9 out of 10 top colleges that graduate most of the African American students who go on to earn PhDs are HBCUs. 9 of the 10 top colleges that graduate most of the Black students who go on to earn PhDs are HBCUs. Listen in even further. More than 50% of the nation's African American public school teachers and 70% of African American dentists and physicians earn their degrees at HBCUs. So I love that fact that even in 1837 at Cheney University, 1854 in Lincoln, 56 at Wilberforce, 57 in Harris Stowe. We didn't just sit down and rock back and forth because Brown versus Board of Education wouldn't happen for another century. And so we started educating ourselves because we had to rise to the occasion. We hoped laws would happen, but this is pre-Civil War. There was no 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. They maybe dreamed of a day they could vote or own land. But in the meanwhile, they rose to the occasion. Now, when black students were admitted or integrated into white schools, they found it necessary to create systems of their own support. For example, I'm a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, a black Greek letter college fraternity. But it was established in 1906 at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, because a handful of students, 7 students, said, this is tough. It's 1906. It's barely the turn of the century. And white people never thought in their lives that their children would sit in college rooms, lecture halls, in desks next to black people. And so these students had to find space to maintain their sanity and their culture and their place in these spaces. And so they started creating these fraternities and sororities over 100 years ago. Rising to the occasion means that the occasion and its opportunities are what motivates us. We aren't interested any longer in permission or maintaining the status quo. We're going to find our own way. Rising to the occasion means that we are denouncing a gradualistic approach to civil rights, to quote Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., as stated in one of his book titles, Why We Can't Wait. We can't wait for others to pull us up. And when the time is convenient or comfortable for them, we need to move now. Rising to the occasion means that we will exude and exemplify our excellence, even when it is an affront to American exceptionalism, that we will shine even when it is not so cool to do so, that we will shine even when there's kickback and pushback. We are going to shine. And we have the audacity to excel because it has been, not going to be, but it has been our survival. Rising to the occasion means that we break barriers inexhaustibly, we set standards amazingly, and we dream limitlessly. We may be the first, but we sure as hell won't be the last. And we will teach other people how to treat us. Rising to the occasion means we won't disdain people from the dominant culture. We appreciate you. We don't disdain people from other ethnic groups and cultures. We celebrate you. But we don't ordain or pedestalize others' view of us. We don't need that. Nor do we wait for the blessing or their nods of approval and acceptance before we bring our brilliance to the table. If we're not invited to the table, we'll create our own. If we're not invited to the table, we will create our own. When people say to me, Dr. G, don't you think it's important for black people to be at the table? I say, no, I don't think it's important for black people to be at the table. I say, I believe that it is so imperative that I'm encouraging black people to buy the forest and to patiently grow the trees so that we can hire the lumberjacks to come and chop down the trees and to put the logs in water and send them up or down the stream so that furniture makers and woodworkers can take them and turn them to a table. And we should also create the buildings and manage the real estate so that when that lumber becomes tables and they move it into office space, that we don't merely have a place at the table. We've created the table. We've grown the wood where the table is harvested. We have employed the people who work in the places where we own the wood, and we employ the wood makers and we pay them well. No, I don't want a seat at the table. I want a seat at the forest so that I can determine if I want to even make that table. People are listening because times are changing. We want to bring our brilliance to the table. Time, which for the past 400 years has not been on our side, but it seems to be slightly working for us today. We're living in a time where people are listening and corporations are watching and philanthropists are learning and they're asking questions. Why? Because these entities are dependent on revenue that is generated by us. they're understanding that we have not just risen to the occasion. We have a significant GNP, gross national product. You add up all the income and the spending power of black people, it would make us like the 7th or 8th largest, wealthiest nation in the world. People better recognize, and we better rise to the occasion and act like we are that nation. And so they're listening to us because they're trying to figure out, how can we get that money? How can we sell to them? Because they can sanction, they can shop anywhere. They have options, they have money, they have conscience, and now they're rising to the occasion. So we're creating our own communications companies. We're creating our own cultural and art centers, and we're creating our own businesses and consulting agencies because we're understanding who we are. We've made America rich. What's wrong with making Black America rich? We are speaking out and leaning in and stepping up. Rising to the occasion means those who dare to boast as our allies cannot merely do so from the comfort of their comfortable lives. Those who dare to boast as our allies cannot merely observe and continuously learn without graduating to action and building new relationships. But Dr. G, I don't know any black people. There are more black people on the face of the earth than at any other point in human history. If people in places even like Wisconsin who don't know black people, they've made a conscientious choice to not know black people, because there are associations within your profession. There are groups within your community. There are entities within society. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be walking past your door, walking their dogs. You might have to go and be where they are. But it's time to graduate from the college, from the school of well-intentioned wokeness, and to take action and to build new relationships. Those who dare to boast as our allies cannot merely quote black authors and activists and colleagues. They must find a new voice using their old and existent power. Don't just quote what black people say to impress your white friends that you read black people. What is your voice? What do you want? What do you want for your children? What do you want for your parents? What do you want for your society? What do you want for your children's teachers? What do you want? So I want to be so bold as to say many white allies are also rising to the occasion by following and supporting black leadership, black innovation, and black intelligence, not out of guilt, but because it makes sense, good sense. I don't care how smart you are as a white person, you don't know my plight as a black person. So you don't have to think for me, you don't have to speak for me, but you can align with me and others like me to support black leadership, black innovation, and black intelligence. Not out of guilt, as I said, but because it makes sense, good sense. To quote Gil Heron Scott, the brilliant black poet and lyricist and activist in the 1960s, had a spoken word piece entitled "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised." And in the first 5 stanzas, or first 5 verses in this first stanza, it says, "You will not be able to stay home, brother. You will not be able to plug in, turn on, and cop out. You will not be able to lose yourself on Skag," I think that was weed, "and skip out for a beer during commercials, because the revolution will not be televised." He was calling out the comfort of America in the 1960s. He knew America's conscience was being pricked. People had seen the brutality on national television. They saw kids sitting at lunch counters and hot, scalding coffee being thrown on them. They watched black people and white people on the Edmund Pettus Bridge having dogs and police dogs sicked on them. America's conscience was pricked, and America was horrified and didn't quite know what to do. So America kept tuning in as if the television, the boob tube, as they used to call it when I was a kid, would tell them what to do. And they thought that from the comfort of their sofa, from the comfort of their living room, their TV room, that they would somehow be a part of the solution by watching. What he was saying was the revolution, the overturning of the painful, degrading, and historic and criminal subjugation of black people won't change by watching television or tweeting or surfing social media. Things will change when our mindsets change and we all say, no, not any longer. My mom knew the world was changing, so she had her white friends visit us from out of town, stay in our homes. I was 6 years old having my white buddies wake up in my bedroom, sitting at my breakfast table. When I was in high school and ran track, my mother would come and record it. She was the cool mom with the we didn't call them video cameras back then. We called them movie cameras, the Super 8. And then she would invite my teammates, most of whom were white, to my house to watch the movies. Many of them have never seen, most of them. Hell, none of them have seen themselves run before. They could see themselves run and the handoffs, and it was cool. And many of them, most of them, had never been in the home of a black person. The change happened in her head and not because of television. And she started putting us in places to learn how to be cross-cultural and putting others in our space to learn how to be welcomed in. The revolution is not going to be something that you just tweet and hashtag and forward and repost. It's got to change in your mind. You've got to rise to the occasion and begin to lean in and learn what your part is. Until others like my podcast audience wake up and become a part of the change, you all are at risk of remaining entangled and ensnared in the perpetualization of a racist and supremacist society. And I don't want that for you. Not because of me. I don't want that for you. Because that means your children will be looking for podcasts in 30 years. Your children will be quoting quotes. Your children will be quoting whoever their black authors are, who are basically saying, give us free. Stop brutalizing us. Stop killing us when we're unarmed. And nobody has time for that. So we must all rise to the occasion and do our part of letting freedom ring. None of us is truly free until all of us are. So lean in this season, move from being a mere listener to being a supporter of my podcast, to an activist, a person who listens and learns how to be part of the solution. We're going to rise to the occasion because it's long overdue. We're going to rise to the occasion because we don't like where we're sitting. We're going to rise to the occasion because others are watching. And we're going to rise to the occasion because we believe America deserves a better occasion. Buckle up, lean in, learn. My request for each of you as my listeners is that you share this podcast with at least 5 people in your network. It doesn't mean that they've got to listen, but share it, post it, tell people what you're listening. I love going on social media and people say, hey, here are 3 podcasts I'm listening to. If you're thinking about understanding issues surrounding race or wanting to get a different perspective, listen to this podcast. It's not going to be televised. If you want to get more of your colleagues to lean in, you might have to share what you know. Someone shared this with you or you somehow haphazardly found it, but you're here. And so I need you to help to share this with at least 5 others. Season 7 is going to be powerful, and we're going to listen to tremendous people who are rising to the occasion. And my hope is that in their rising, they help the tide to cause all boats to rise. We can do this. We can have better. We can be better, but not from where we are. So let's go higher. Enjoy season 7. I am.
Black like me. Black like me.
Now I've got some special shout outs to the many talented members of our ever-growing production team. Eli Steenlich, who produces the show and handles all of our social media. Don Thornton, my podcast manager, who keeps things running smoothly and arranges all of my interviews. Jeremy Holiday, who edits the podcast. Corey Saffold, who created this year's theme music, and Marcus Fleming on the vocals. And of course, Jakesha Hunt, who is responsible for our fabulous new podcast merch.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.
Black like me.